I'm just going to say right out of the gate that this video is going to be a lot more serious than the last one that I made. This video will include themes of rape, kidnapping, torture, assault, and just brutal, disgusting acts against women. If any of these themes are sensitive to you, I highly recommend you click off this video and go watch another one, please. But if you do feel like you can stomach it, continue watching. Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Caden K from Hide and Seek, and welcome to a brand new video. Make sure you grab your snacks, get a blanket, definitely get comfy, because today we're going to be delving into the murders of the Toolbox Killers. We will be going over every single known victim that sadly lost their life to these deranged individuals. But anyway, enough talk, let's hop in. It's Halloween night in the streets of the Sunland District in the San Fernando Valley of California. Shirley Ledford was walking home from her job when she was approached by two men in a van. Inside the van was Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, also known as the Toolbox Killers. They asked her if she needed a ride, and she accepted. This is when a simple acceptance will turn into a literal nightmare. Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker was born on September 27, 1940, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was born into a family that didn't want him, and as a result was placed into an orphanage. After some time, he was eventually brought into a family, but to put it lightly, it wasn't the best of environments for him. His desire for crime had revealed itself in the early stages of his youth. At the young age of 12 years old, he gained a criminal record that ranged from shoplifting to petty theft. Surprisingly enough, he was considered to be very smart with an IQ of 138. He learned somewhat quickly, though, that school wasn't exactly for him, so he dropped out in 1957. In that 1 year that he dropped out, he was arrested for stealing a car, hit and run, and evading arrest. All in 1 year. Dude was on a roll. He was placed in the California Youth Authority until he eventually turned 18 years old. From 1959 to 1974, he was in and out of jail for more crimes. The one that got him locked up in California Men's Colony was when he stabbed a young supermarket employee after the clerk claimed he stole. He was a literal 1 inch away from this dude's heart. Guy evaded death. It's crazy. After the stabbing, he was eventually apprehended by two other employees, and then the police promptly arrived. When he was eventually put in jail, it took roughly a year before he'd then meet someone that sparked his interest. Roy Lewis Norris was born on February 5th, 1948, in Greeley, Colorado. While he did live with family occasionally, he was repeatedly placed into foster families all throughout Colorado. Rough is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to describing his home life and basically just his adolescence. Neglect, denial of proper clothing and food, and sexual abuse are just a few of the things he had gone through as a boy. Norris's sexual desires became present when he was 16 years old. After hitting on a female relative in her own home, he was then sent home, and the father got relayed this information. And obviously, naturally, he wasn't the happiest man. Basically told Norris he's about to get his butt beat. Like any normal human after hearing that news, he stole his dad's truck, drove up to the Rocky Mountains, and threatened to end his life. He was soon taken back to his parents. When he came back, his parents told him and his sister that divorce was going to happen. It's unclear on whether or not he took this well, but a year later, he did drop out of high school and join the Navy. He was deployed in Vietnam in 1969, but never saw true combat. He was then honorably discharged after being in the Navy for a single tour of duty. After this, it all just went downhill. He had racked up a good amount of sexual assault offenses from the years 1969 to 1975. And 1975 is when he'd eventually be put in the California Men's Colony. It is here when he'd meet his partner in crime. The pair became very acquainted in jail, actually. They shared very similar views on sexual violence and a major prejudice against women. Once they were eventually released from jail, their little fantasies would sadly become reality. After a few months of just getting their feet on the ground, they brought up their plans of doing heinous acts to girls again in late February of 1979. The two saved up money to purchase a 1977 GMC cargo van. They named the van Murder Mac. According to Bittaker, this van was perfect for them because it was windowless and had a large passenger sliding door, which made it easier to pull in girls. In late April, the two men came upon a secluded fire road located in San Gabriel Mountains. This is where they did their deed. We're now closing in on the murders. Let's get into it. Lucinda Lynn Schaefer was just 16 years old on June 24th, 1979. As she was leaving a Presbyterian church meeting, she was approached by Norris and Bittaker around 7:46 p.m. They tried to convince her to get into the van, but she denied their requests. These two weren't going to take no as an answer. They parked in a driveway not too far from where she was and waited for her to get near. After a brief exchange of words, she was dragged into the van. The killers came up with a plan when picking up these girls. Bittaker was to turn up the radio to full volume while Norris bounded the girls. When she was first pulled into the van, she was screaming and resisting, but she quickly regained her composure. It's believed that she just accepted her fate. When Bittaker was eventually asked about that night, he said in a book called Alone with the Devil that she, quote, displayed a magnificent state of self-control and composed acceptance of the conditions of which she had no control. She shed no tears, offered no resistance, and expressed no great concern for her safety. I guess she knew what was coming. End quote. She was brought to the fire road and raped by both men. When she asked Norris if they intended to kill her, he responded with no. This, sadly, wasn't the case. While the two were deciding on whether or not to kill her, she asked for one simple thing. Quote, "Can I take only a second to pray?" Schaefer was then strangled to death with a coat hanger that was wrapped around her neck with pliers before she even got the chance to pray. Her body was wrapped in a shower curtain and then thrown into a canyon. Audrea Joy Hall was just 18 years old on July 8, 1979. She was hitchhiking when Bittaker called her into the van. When she hopped in, Bittaker offered her a drink from a cooler in the back. Norris hid in the back and jumped her the second he got the chance. He bound her arms, legs, and taped her mouth shut. They brought her to the fire road and both had turns raping her. When they thought there were headlights from a car, Bittaker moved her to some bushes while Norris drove in search of the car. Upon returning, they moved uphill and made her walk nude up the hill where she would pose for some Polaroid pictures. They drove to their final location more upward on the hill. When Norris left to get a beer, he came back to Bittaker looking at Polaroid pictures of Hall. But their victim wasn't there. While Norris was gone, Bittaker told Hall that she was going to die and that he wanted her to give him reasons to live. As she was listening, he jammed an ice pick into her ear, reaching her brain. He then slumped her body over and did it again to her other ear. He then slammed down on the pick with his shoe until the handle broke. Her body was disposed of by throwing it off a cliff. Jackie Doris Gilliam and Jacqueline Lee Lamp had been hitchhiking along the Pacific Coast Highway. Jackie Gilliam was 15 years old, and Jacqueline Lamp was 13 years old. As they sat at a bus stop close to Hermosa Beach, the killers had taken note of them. They pulled up next to them and offered a ride. The girls accepted and hopped into the van. When they entered, the girls realized very quickly that the direction they were heading wasn't on the highway any longer, but rather to the mountains. The killers tried to play it off like nothing was happening, but the girls weren't having any of it. Jacqueline Lamp attempted to open the door, but she was hit over the head with weights, knocking her out. Norris proceeded to bound and gag Jackie Doris, and then did the same to Jacqueline. They drove to the mountains and were held captive for 2 whole days. These 2 whole days were filled with vile and disgusting sexual acts. There were audio recordings of the rape, Bittaker tortured Jackie's breasts by stabbing with an ice pick and even tore off a nipple with his pliers. Many lewd pictures were taken of the two girls, and one of the girls was even forced to act like a cousin of Bittaker when he was performing these sexual acts. Jackie Gilliam was killed by getting stabbed in both ears with an ice pick and then strangled. Jacqueline Lamp was struck over the head with a sledgehammer and then strangled until they thought she was dead. When she opened her eyes once more, she was hit a few more times until she was eventually strangled to death. Their bodies were then disposed of, getting thrown over an embankment. Shirley Lynette Ledford was just 16 years old on the night of Halloween in 1979. When she was walking home from her job, she was approached by Norris and Bittaker. She recognized Bittaker as a man that came in when she would wait tables at a restaurant. This simple acceptance would be the one thing that seals her fate. Instead of driving to their usual spot, Bittaker immediately flipped on the recorder and started beating Shirley Ledford after she was bound by Norris with tape on the mouth. If you thought the others were disgusting, just you wait, everyone. Bittaker removed the duct tape and started to degrade her and physically abuse her. He told her on multiple occasions to, quote, say something, end quote, and then to, quote, scream, baby, end quote. She was told more and more to scream, louder, as Bittaker began to strike her with a hammer, mainly beating at her breasts. He began to mutilate parts of her body with pliers, such as her breasts and genitals. The two killers switched places, and now it was Norris's turn. He, just like Bittaker, forced her to scream. When Norris began to reach into the toolbox for the sledgehammer, Ledford began to beg and plead. Norris struck down on her elbow and did it multiple times, 25 to be exact. After 2 hours of pure torture and pain, she was eventually strangled to death by a wire coat hanger. The two killers decided to be a little bit more ballsy and dispose of her body in a random neighborhood. A poor jogger came upon her body the next morning. From an autopsy report, quote, there was a linear compression mark, soft tissue, and a pedicule hemorrhage around the neck. There was evidence of multiple blunt force trauma to the face, head, and breasts. Her rectum, the lining inside of her rectum, and her vagina had been torn from being stretched too far, in part due to the insertion of a pair of pliers by Bittaker. There were bruises on her left elbow, a cut to the right index finger, and a puncture wound to the left hand. The wrists and ankles had ligature marks as well. End quote. The investigation was basically open and shut. Norris couldn't keep his dang mouth shut. He was telling a buddy named Joseph Jackson, a guy who he went to jail with, all of these disgusting acts that he was doing. Jackson, being an absolute Chad, decided to report this to his attorney, which was then brought over to the LAPD. Paul Benham, the detective that was assigned, noticed a lot of connections right off the bat. A woman named Robin Robeck, a victim of the rapings, had reported being raped by two Caucasian men in their mid-30s before being released. A line of mugshots was shown to Robin, and she was able to identify Bittaker and Norris from the line. This was the LAPD's cue to kind of start picking up the pace. Norris was arrested after dealing marijuana at the beaches, while Bittaker was arrested for the rape of Robin Robeck. Bittaker's apartment and van were searched, and oh boy, was it funky! Oh my goodness, it was funky. It was really funky. They found a plethora of disgusting pictures of the victims. They also found the audio recording of Shirley Ledford's final moments. They found a sledgehammer. They found a lot, and much more too. Also, something that's worth mentioning is that Norris's apartment had been searched as well. He had a bracelet in his apartment. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you learn the fact that the bracelet came from their final victim, it kind of adds to the creepiness. Dude was sick. Norris was eventually questioned, and of course, being a killer, says, "No, not at all. I don't have any involvement, not a hint." Bruh. Police began to notice him fold when they started bringing up some really good evidence from the case. He then began to spill the beans. He stated multiple times that he wasn't really involved as much as Bittaker, and that he was the guy who probably had more charges against him. Obviously, we kind of know that both of them were pretty disgusting, so didn't really help his case. He gave very detailed recounts of what had happened. This basically just solidified that these two were 100% responsible. Norris pleaded guilty to a lot, like a whole lot of charges, like a good portion of charges. Let's read them off, shall we? 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, 2 counts of rape, and a single count of robbery. Now, that sounds like a lot, but just you wait. Bittaker had been arraigned with 29 charges. Now, obviously, these aren't official. These aren't solidified charges. These are arraigned. But 29 whole charges definitely sounds like a lot more than just like the 6 that Norris got. His charges consisted of rape, kidnapping, sodomy, and murder. This isn't even including his other various charges of criminal conspiracy. He was eventually just charged with guilty of 5 counts to first-degree murder, 1 charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, 5 charges of kidnapping, 9 charges of rape, 2 charges of forcible oral copulation, 1 charge of sodomy, and 3 charges of unlawful possession of a firearm. Bittaker's trial began on January 19th, 1981. This is where I would say most of his psychotic behaviors are really shown. Now, I won't go too heavily into every little thing because there was simply just so much information dumped during all of this time, but I will highlight one of the more important pieces of evidence that came from this entire process. Shirley Ledford's audio tape of her brutal murder was played in court. The tape has never been released and has only been heard once to the public eye. An NBC reporter that was at the day of the hearing caught some brief audio of it. Now, I am about to play a very brief section of this audio. If you don't want to hear this disgusting audio, which frankly, I don't blame you, I do not blame you, please skip to this time. Okay, here it is.
A spectator rushed from the courtroom. It was more than she could stand.
Here are what a few people had to say about the tape after having to hear it.
I've heard screams before. I thought I'd be able to sit and listen, but I've never heard anything like that in my life.
I just couldn't believe it. I have a daughter, and I just could see her, and I couldn't take it.
I just picture those girls and how alone they were when they died. I'm sorry.
It's truly disgusting and vile. That's the only thing that you can say about it. And frankly, what I feel is the most sickening thing about this entire situation is the fact that Bittaker, while he was on the stand, sat there and smiled while this tape was being played. He's just truly a disgusting individual. There is a transcript online of the audio, so if you are just morbidly curious about it, you can check it out, but just be aware that it is gut-wrenching. It's very hard to read, but if you think you can stomach it, it's out there. Frankly, I wish we could say that we had just a super happy ending to this, but it's not really the case, especially when this type of stuff happens. Lawrence Bittaker was sentenced to death in 1981, understandably. Roy Norris was just sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2010. Yeah, good luck trying to convince them to let you back out in the world, dude. As the years went by, the two just rotted away in a jail cell. Frankly, I feel like they rotted for a little too long, though, because here. Bittaker died while awaiting death penalty on December 13th of 2019. 2019. 40 years. And you couldn't kill this dude? You couldn't come to yourself and say, wow, this dude maybe should die? I don't know. Just you wait until you hear Roy Norris's, though. Roy Norris died in prison on February 24th of 2020. It took nearly 40 years for these deranged individuals to pass. Frankly, I feel like that was way too long. Honestly. Way too long. Frankly, I feel the best thing that comes from it is the fact that there's closure. There's closure to all of this. There's no unknowns on who the killers might be or something along those lines. We know who did it. They were charged for all of the disgusting acts that they did. And they rotted away in a jail cell until they eventually died in prison, like they should have. Those poor innocent girls had to die at the hands of these two disgusting individuals. If there is something out there, I hope that those girls are living the most peaceful life, because frankly, they had years, 70 years left on them, but they got it cut short because of sickos like these. This now brings us to the end of it all. Two horrible men committing these disgusting acts, but they were caught. That's the best thing that we can say out of this entire thing, is the fact that these two dudes were caught. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was very difficult to write a lot of the stuff and definitely difficult to say it. It made me really sick at a lot of times, simply just because how graphic it is and just how young these innocent girls were. But their names will be remembered and their faces will forever be remembered in history. These girls will never be forgotten. Anyway, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this one. This definitely was a lot more serious than my last one, but I frankly feel like this one needed to be out in the world. These two disgusting people need to be known, and these innocent girls needed to be known as well. If you do like these longer, more serious, well thought out ones, please let me know, because I will definitely do them in the future. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Caden Knighton of Hide and Seek. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you liked it, why not like and subscribe? And if you didn't, dislike it and let me know what I can improve on. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.